Okay, let's see if this is. I'll let you know when it's actually. I see it
Or
in
should
my
we wait
preview
for the
here.
245? Or I don't know. You have it set for 245. Should we wait
Nah,
or
I
no? Let's just
was
get ripping.
get going. Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, we are live on YouTube.
All right. So, welcome to Jam Sessions. There we go. We're up. Oh, weird. Okay. So, yeah, sorry. Doing this live. Welcome to Jam Sessions. Today I'm joined with Justin Jackson. We're going to be digging into what he's got going on with Transistor. And I guess I'll share a few updates along the way. But Justin, obviously, thanks for hopping on. I kind of blue sky you out of the blue yesterday,
Yeah.
figuring take advantage of your slot that you have open with since Brian's on vacation this week and not
Yeah.
doing the panel.
Yeah. Brian and I normally record on Thursdays, kind of right after our transistor team meeting. So it was perfect. It was you grabbed the opportunity. You heard about the opportunity and you grabbed it.
I grabbed
But
it.
I
Yeah.
like it because I'm still around and I like to keep momentum going just with recording. And you and I have talked quite a bit on Blue Sky. You're like one of the Blue Sky had this big
That
initial
big surge.
surge, and then there are a bunch of people that were kind of a part of that new community, and slowly, many people have faded, but you've been there, I think, from the beginning because you built a starter pack, some sort of starter
Yeah,
pack
like
thing.
aggregator. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
basically like a starter pack aggregator thing. It's still running. It's actually really hard to keep up because I'm getting a lot of, I think it's mostly bot traffic, but it's just like so much bot traffic, like millions of requests on it,
Yeah.
which
Do you
is
think it's
crazy.
more than what Twitter would be, or do you think it's like, is it just this is just having an open social network? Any social network's going to get a lot of bots, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's just probably because of like the way that I'm structuring the pages, the fact that I have all the blue sky profiles and the fact that you can kind of browse all the starter packs and it's not like a truncated view of like the people that are in them, compared to like what you kind of see with like a logged out experience on the blue sky app.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of exposes itself. I mean, I don't think I'm quite getting like the amount of like qualified traffic that like Mubs is probably getting with blue sky directory,
Yeah.
but
My
yeah, I'm
guess
just
is
trying
a
to keep
lot
it
of
up.
that's died down.
Yeah, I would think so.
Why do you think that happened? Why do you think it's like, is it just, it's just the pull back to Twitter? Like in the bootstrapper startup founder community, it feels like, and software developers, it just feels like, there's this surge and people are checking it out, but then invariably there's just still too much established conversation on Twitter. It was hard for people to
Yeah, I don't
maintain
know.
too.
I feel like I haven't fully ejected from Twitter, but I'd say that there's a lot more noise there, you
Mm,
know? I actually feel
yeah.
like I still have better conversations or better like interactions on Blue Sky, but I do think there is that kind of ebb and flow. And I think there was that kind of rush. I could see it coming back.
Yeah.
If anything, I think, I guess one of the things I was thinking about with starter packs, I kind of gravitated towards that because I saw it such like a powerful thing to get
Yeah.
people on and integrated into the platform, especially when you're on like a new platform. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you obviously had some early starter packs that were kind of stirring up a lot of that energy
Yeah.
to get
I
people to
was
come
trying. I
over.
gave it the good old college try.
Yeah, you did. I mean, I think you put a big dent in as far as like building the awareness and getting the people to kind of like at least dip a toe, And then,
Yeah.
granted, they might not still be in the pool, but I think you made a great effort.
This is what worries me is I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about open standards
Hmm.
as a refuge for creators and anyone who cares about the internet. And part of me during that initial surge to Blue Sky was hoping like this is going to be the new thing. Like people are going to see what Blue Sky did is they paired a boring thing, which is an open protocol, with a really nice user experience on an app that they controlled. And that was so exciting. And then Transistor released, like, we've been trying to figure out podcast comments forever. And we realized, oh, we could use Blue Sky as the backbone for like podcast comments. And that was so exciting. It was like fairly easy to implement.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, if Blue Sky becomes the de facto social network, like if this momentum continues, then you could see a future where, a social network is as open as a internet browser. It's like
Totally, yeah.
we're just all using different clients to connect with the web, or an email client might be a better example. And I was a little bit sad to see how hard that is. It's just so hard to.
Yeah.
I think one, fight with an algorithm that is really, really targeting the worst parts of our brains, so using outrage and just anything that will, grab our attention,
Stir someone up,
and stir us up. Because the truth is about Blue Skies, I mean, one of the things I've appreciated about it is that I often get bored on it. The algorithm, even the following algorithm, is just not as spicy as Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. It's fairly easy to like browse through it, reply to a few things, and then
you
get
might even
off.
catch up to like what you saw the last time you pulled open the app. Where like that's not happening on Twitter. It's like you can't keep up with it.
It's never ending. Yeah. And I can see, the way people use Twitter is, I'm bored at work and it's like, I'm just going to shoot over here. And then it's like just that dopamine inducing feeling. I mean, people use it for other things too. The thing that initially attracted us there was it felt like this small little living room on the internet with my favorite people. And as I was building relationships, it was like, oh, I'm going to catch up with that person. And we're having these little conversations that are meaningful. But as soon as social networks started moving to way more, not just algorithmically driven, but the way that they tuned their algorithms, once that happened, it's almost like you couldn't put the cat back in the bag. And then it just makes anything else, any alternative, so much harder to establish.
Well, yeah, it just doesn't have the vibrations, right? Like to your point, it's
Yeah.
like you open the Twitter app and you can feel some activity, and it's engineered to kind of like create that energy or that activity around it.
Yeah.
And so essentially we're going back to, Twitter 2011, or like early days, and it just doesn't have that same kind of energy, that same kind of vibrancy that it has. But I think as more things get integrated in, I think it'll be cool. Like, you're seeing blogging platforms that are basically based on like the AT protocol. I think there could be some interesting ways of just like getting more diverse kind of like inputs into it, and maybe also outputs out of it. I don't know.
Do you feel like, I mean, I kind of go between two extremes. I keep flipping and flopping. On one hand, I think there are days where I'm just sick of the internet, like the internet the way it is right now, just like going on LinkedIn and it's all just performative bullshit. And then every once in a while, I'll like log into Twitter just to read and see what people are talking about. And it's just like, this is just garbage. And then, I'll check out Instagram, and that it just feels like everything is trash. Everything is mind rot. Everything is just, and then this whole AI.
Everything's AI, just like trying to market to you, like automatic.
And even the conversations around AI are so depressing. Like, I've had this Mega Maker community since 2013, And the people inside the community are stressed. Like there's a lot of software developers there, and they're they don't feel good. They just feel like it's an existential threat. And so there's this there's just so many days now I get on the internet and I'm just like, fuck all of this. It just feels like shit. And
Like it's
and
not
then even
inspiring or
and
energizing anymore. Just
and
draining.
then and even in the podcast industry, so I'm the co-owner of Transistor, which is a podcast hosting platform. We've benefited from these open standards, specifically RSS, and interestingly, RSS just worked so much better with podcasting than it did with blogs, because the app experience, the client experience that Apple Podcasts made, and then Overcast and Pocket Cast and all these, it's actually a really nice user experience with this open protocol backend that really hasn't been achieved in very many other verticals. And we've benefited.
RSS had it for news and stuff, but the death of Google Reader really put a really kind of just like put a break on that whole movement. I mean, obviously you have Feeder and Readwise and some other things that are kind of.
I also just think that the mode of consumption is different, because with a podcast, like in my podcast app, I use Pocket Casts. I basically look at the new episodes filter most often, and I'm just scrolling through new episodes going, which one kind of grabs me today on my walk to work. But it doesn't feel as overwhelming. Like I'm fine to just archive episodes that I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And so I just have a queue of, interesting episodes I could listen to, but I'm fine to, I don't feel overwhelmed by it. But Google Reader, it was just like, I'm consuming like, maybe 100 RSS feeds. And just having all of those articles come in every day, and sometimes multiple articles per RSS feed, that I think overwhelmed people in a user experience kind of way. So I think the user experience of a podcast app just matches RSS better than the reader experience. I think that's why you want a little bit of an algorithm with articles. Like you want some sort of filter, and articles is more, I think, benefits more from social cues. Like you might share something on Blue Sky and say, oh, you gotta read this article from this author. I'm less likely, I mean, there's a few newsletters I subscribe to and maybe Substacks, but like a podcast, I kind of fall in love with the concept or the host or the story or the arc. And then I'm just subscribed. I'm just going to subscribe and get whatever new episodes they send me. Whereas with articles, I might not necessarily care about, if the author is releasing 5 articles a week. First of all, that's a lot of articles. And second of all, I just might not, I need another layer on top, which might be social, a social cue to say, check this out.
Yeah, with the RSS, I feel like, for the articles specifically, I feel like I only subscribe to RSS feeds that are like of like someone who I know, like personal RSS feeds. So not really subscribing to like a TechCrunch, or any sort of like big news outlet that could like really rifle out the, the articles rapidly. So I don't feel so crazy on it. It's like more like the ones that I'm sure they're probably posting on social, but at the same time, I'm not engaged enough on social. Like I could miss it. So I just kind of do it on the RSS as like a backup plan. So like if I happen to miss the posting on social, I know that I still at least see the new article. And maybe that's just more of a self-control thing. Cause I have a buddy who he's subscribed to, I don't even know how many podcasts, and he subscribes to mine and he never sees the episodes come out because his latest, newest ones is like, he wanted me to, actually, it was probably most successful when I was cross-posting the podcast episodes on Substack, because at least he got an email from it. Because I needed to start sending out the emails.
Yeah.
Like, when I publish an episode and stuff. And I feel like that at least gets it out of the noise
Yeah.
of a heavy feed. And so, yeah, I think
I mean, the key with a
to
podcast,
each their own.
yeah, the key with the podcast is that, and this is not this is very difficult, but you want, for whatever audience you have, you want your episode that week to be compelling enough that most people who are subscribed will prioritize it.
Yeah.
Because people are making those decisions in the car, like, I'm about to drive to work, what am I going to listen to? And once you're locked in, you're kind of locked in.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like before I start on a walk. And there's just certain, the reason like the Mostly Technical podcast is successful is because people want an update on the two hosts, Ian and Aaron, every week. And so you're willing to prioritize that. It's like, oh, a new episode dropped. Like, I'm going to prioritize that. I think with articles, it's kind of the same. And Substacks, it's probably kind of the same. And there are tricks you can use with podcasts. Like for the Build Your SaaS podcast, I've always had it connected to an automation in Kit, where as soon as the episode's published, Kit sees it in the RSS feed and automatically sends out an email. Yeah. And that can be another kind of prompt for people to check out the episode.
Exactly, yeah.
You probably need multiple prompts for most content these days because there is so much noise. But it's funny, we're on YouTube Live here. Nathan Gathright just asked if we saw the product market fit collapse post. And he says, the quote is, customer expectations are spiking exponentially. Suddenly, good enough solutions look obsolete when users realize they can receive a more efficient, hyper-personalized, and near instant response. Did you see this article?
No,
this
I
is
didn't see this post, no.
This is one of the ones that it just got shared so much that I eventually had to check it out, which is usually how articles work. But basically they're talking about the fact that product market fit for a lot of companies, like some companies treat it like a destination, like, oh, once we've achieved it, then we're good. But it's actually a treadmill. You have to keep maintaining it.
Yeah, totally.
And then talking about as shifts in technology can really affect, product market fit, and then AI in particular. And then they gave some examples, like Chegg is I think it's a content-based site. Like, oh yeah, homework help for students. So obviously, with ChatGPT, they're getting effed.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think this is the promise of AI with regards to content is another thing. It's like all of a sudden people are going to be getting all their recommendations from their LLM that's been tuned to them, and oh, you might enjoy, this or whatever.
Although with the LLM stuff, there's always going to be that delay unless they're feeding it with other external sources, So I mean, it's not going to be the pulse. It might be the signal from the noise, which actually maybe that's the better thing. But, people have tried to do that with news and different things like that. And it just doesn't seem like people are really gravitating towards that either. They want that, to your point, like they want the chaos of the Twitter pulse, like to feel like they got it. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting.
And back to this idea of protocols. So like one of the things I'm actively investing a lot of time in is this podcast standards project.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because you know what? I've actually owned openpodcast.org since like 2017.
Oh, wow. Well, we have podstandards.org.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll check it out.
And this is a consortium of podcast hosting platforms and podcast apps. And so we meet kind of every podcast conference. We have a few meetings, and then we have a Slack where we're trying to basically talk about how can we move the standard forward And this was originally in response to Spotify, and Spotify was trying to basically become the YouTube of audio, right? We're going to centralize everything. And even when they initially launched into podcasting, you could submit your podcast feed to Spotify, but they were re-hosting all of that audio.
Oh, they were actually ingesting the audio, and so you couldn't get like analytics or anything off of it, or
that's
like
right. We couldn't get analytics, and also it broke some of the main features of podcasting, which is before you could replace your audio file, and then anybody who streamed or downloaded that audio file after you'd updated it would get the new version. But that's not possible on YouTube. Once you upload a video, you can't replace it, and that was also true on Spotify. And then obviously anyone doing dynamic ads didn't work because the audio was hosted on Spotify.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it wasn't getting the stream back basically, or
yeah. So they were kind of the original threat.
Catalyst.
I mean, they were also not to give them credit. I think they did the podcast industry a massive service by introducing a whole generation of millennials, mostly, to audio podcasting. In terms of distribution, they dramatically increased podcast distribution and who was discovering podcasts. And also, to their credit, I mean, I think this has been the interesting thing, is they've started, with podcasting, they tried to be the centralized platform that had more control, but realized they couldn't get enough, basically, they couldn't get enough podcasts on Spotify if they maintained control. So they had to let go of that. And that's when we got pass through for audio files. So now they're streaming when you click play on Spotify. In most cases, not all, but in most cases, it's streaming off a hosting provider like Transistor.
Yeah, Transistor CDN. Yeah.
But now the challenge is YouTube. YouTube is like gobbling up every form of media consumption. Like they are Netflix's number one competitor. They are a competitor to basically everything, anything that you might consume in terms of content.
Well, I think on the last show you were talking about what Transistor's video approach is you're trying to take with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a long shot, but I think what the podcast standards group has kind of has centered around is this idea of we need to have some sort of answer to video and YouTube. And one thing we know, this is Helen right here. She's on our team. She's done some surveys with our customers, specifically people who come to Transistor and say, do you host video? And we often ask them, what does that mean to you? And their response is usually, well, we want to distribute if we're going to do a video podcast, we want to distribute that everywhere. So yes, YouTube, but also if Spotify offers video, we want to distribute it there. And if there's other places we don't know about that support video, we also want to distribute it there. So creators, I think, just want the maximum amount of distribution for their content. They want their content to be available everywhere. And if that's
you can do video on Spotify, right?
Yeah, Spotify you can, but right now it's they went back to the old model.
It's like a Spotify creator only kind of feature.
You can basically, if you have an audio feed already on Spotify, you can go into the Spotify the panel's a good example. We have an RSS feed hosted on Transistor, but I can log into Spotify for Creators and replace the audio episode with a video episode. But then currently we lose all of the stats for that episode, and we can't, there's no way of updating it on Transistor. There's no way so they've gone back to the centralized model. But once again, I think they're realizing in order to achieve what they want to achieve, which is we want as much video on Spotify as we can, we might have to open it up more in order to get where we want to go. So
Yeah.
this is why we're exploring things like HLS and HLS streaming yeah, and you were at Vimeo for a while, correct?
So yeah, I was at Vimeo, and obviously, yeah, that used to be, you know, back when I was there, because when I joined, I was like the 15th person there or something like that. My responsibility was to rewrite the video player essentially, and this was back in like the Flash days.
Oh wow.
But yeah, but obviously worked on that, and then also worked with the team to build like the HTML5 player and all that stuff. And back then it was the destination for video creators like directors, cinematographers, animators, and they all wanted to get Vimeo staff picked. And obviously they've moved on from that direction. And
they've kind of pivoted to B2B. Yeah,
I think they're more of a Wistia, and they kind of increased their price a little bit. I think they definitely should have increased their prices before, because back in the day, the pro subscription was only like $200 a year or something like that. And you could actually do unlimited videos with API access to the direct file. So essentially you could have a CDN to host all your videos for $200 a year.
Yeah.
I remember talking with, if you're familiar with the skate channel, The Barracks.
Yes. Yeah,
YouTube.
That's
Steve Barra.
Steve Barra and all those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember one time I had a conversation with them. I was like, oh, you should just use the Vimeo Pro, and then you could use our player or use your own player, whatever you want to do. And so, yeah, it's kind of funny to give those tweaks. But to your point, I think, video distribution is tricky. I think video is hard. It's just bigger, heavier.
Yeah.
And when people do say everywhere, I mean, I think it does make sense. Like, for a video, like I could easily see Transistor basically allowing for a video upload, and then kind of doing the fork of like posting it to YouTube, but then also stripping the audio and then having both sources and kind of being that broker. That was one of the things I was actually even trying to pitch at Vimeo back in the day. And I think they eventually did do it, but be the distribution source of the video. If they're already uploading it to Vimeo, why not let them also post it to YouTube, but be the one interface that everyone interacts through. And then also use like the Vimeo player as the one that you showcase on your portfolio, but then, make it really streamlined for them to basically distribute and get more exposure to their video and kind of route all that stuff back. But, it's tricky.
I mean, it's funny because I even looking at like the prices on Wistia, because obviously they've made it work. The whole joke about YouTube is we don't even know if they've been able to make it actually profitable or how profitable they've been able to make it.
That's true.
But, they've got their pricing starts at $25. Is that right?
There has to be some crazy limits on.
Yeah, let's look at here. Oh, okay. So they've actually got their bandwidth limits right here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the reason that these sites pivoted to B2B is it's just less traffic. Like if you had a really popular video on Vimeo back in the day, like a really cool indie film or something like that.
Oh, it get millions of views.
Yeah, it could get a lot of views. But now it's like, well, if we're just hosting kind of B2B video, then, it's not as much bandwidth, basically. See, it's funny, they don't even mention bandwidth on here. Let's see. Storage. Oh, here we go, bandwidth. So, I mean, it does look like folks have kind of standardized. It's like 2 terabytes of bandwidth per month.
2 terabytes, 1 terabyte.
200 gigs if you're on the free one. So
2+ on that higher plan.
Do you think
custom.
did Vimeo end up building most of their infrastructure, like CDN and all that stuff? Is that how they make it?
Well, actually, for the longest time, we were on Akamai
Okay.
for the CDN as the main one. And then they did end up going to a more like distributed kind of CDN where like some of it was on Akamai, some of it was on, I think, Limelight.
Okay.
And then we also had our own kind of like streaming infrastructure. So we were handling HLS and some of the other like, trying to, there's another streaming format that I forgetting right now, but primarily HLS, and there was another one with like a manifest. But yeah, I'd say mostly it was obviously like CDN was the Akamai, but they did get a little bit more because the cost on that is just so much. Especially talking about paying Akamai stuff. I think your approach with Cloudflare and R2 is probably the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we're leaning towards. All of this is, again, so
You're still going to have to do some transcoding though, and some different stuff to process all the videos, because obviously you don't want to just chunk a 4 gig video up there.
Yeah, I mean the other thing is the technical side of this is not even the hardest part. So it is the hard part. We got to figure out. So sorry, the technical and cost side of this is not even the hardest part. Yeah. It's hard. It's still hard to figure all that out. And like, how are we going to manage bandwidth? How are we going to manage costs? How are we going to price this? That's all. The harder question is, can we make, for this to be meaningful to me, I want this to be a viable and robust alternative to YouTube that consumers are actually choosing.
Gotcha.
And that is tough. And that's goes back to our blue sky.
That's behavior. That's behavior. That's adjusting user behavior. Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, I think. But
you can see that the opportunities. It's still tough, totally. And you can see with if the right pieces fall into place, like if we can convince our friends at Apple to do a real push into this and help us out, and maybe even, they come out with a better interface and app for video podcasts, and maybe they even cache some of the video on the more popular shows for us, but still give us the analytics
the load.
Back.
Yeah.
You could see a future, but man.
Well, it's also then agreeing, like, I guess obviously Apple's one thing, but would you say, is Apple the biggest podcast app amongst podcast listeners?
It's the biggest. Well, this is something else I've been investigating, but it's the biggest.
Like dedicated app.
It's the biggest it's the biggest in the open ecosystem, in that they respect almost all of the open standards that we care about. I mean, there's some that we would like them to support that they don't, but they've been a great benevolent platform for podcasts, and they're celebrating 20 years, I think today, of Apple Podcasts.
Oh, wow.
So, in terms of consumption, they are, if you look at, again, it's hard to get all of this data, but let's see if I can show you this one chart I have. The interesting thing is that oh yeah, here, I can show you this. So I've been writing this article forever. I have this thesis that I'm working on. I've rewritten this article now 3 times.
Nice.
So I have this thesis that there's this group called legacy listeners that drive most of the current podcast industry. These are people that got.
I'm among that list. I'm sure.
So generally, I say these are super consumers in the Gen X, who are Gen X or older millennials, aged 35 to 55, who are introduced to podcasts likely through iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Many of whom started listening on iPods, And if you look, the hard thing about statistics and data is you're always getting newcomers coming in, right? So you can look at some data and you can go, well, YouTube is just the highest across the board. So let me see if I can find that chart. So if you look at this age group here, 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35, etc., YouTube is top for all of them. And even in this group that I'm talking about, 35 to 54, Apple Podcasts is high, but Spotify
still,
and YouTube.
yeah.
But my point is that I think there is a cohort of legacy listeners that are likely people like you and I who are technical nerds, kind of started podcasting right when it came out. And we actually drive most of the current consumption. So you probably can't see this, but when you look at,
no one's probably subscribing, right? Like, I mean, I guess with like YouTube, they're probably going more off of the homepage as opposed to necessarily like digging into channels and subscriptions and stuff.
Yeah. And I think the current podcast industry doesn't realize, I could be wrong about this, but this is my theory, is that when you look at, for example, the top 250 US podcasts, downloads and views, Apple Podcasts is always at the top. And you'd be like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would it be 37% of all downloads and views when that other chart I showed you shows that it's like such a small little, in terms of number of people, it's smaller. But when we look at share of consumption, it's bigger. And my answer to that is, I think there's this group of legacy listeners who have just drive most of the podcast industry as we know it today. And my concern is that that group is older, and in any market, you need,
they're aging out.
Yeah, so if this is the group that's driving most of the consumption and actually most of these high ad rates, because typically we're people who have good careers, have high incomes, we have a commute, we're right in that bullseye for perfect high earning listener, which is why when you go to the acquired, there we go. When you look at the acquired sponsor deck, to sponsor a 4-episode season and be the feature sponsor, the presenting sponsor, it's $1.5 million for 4 episodes. And a mid-roll is $1 million. And they have sponsors that are doing this. They sold out all 4 slots for summer and spring of 2025.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So why is JP Morgan Payments willing to pay that high of a premium? Well, it's to reach this legacy listener that is, has all these attributes. But what happens when they age out? So there is a younger group coming after us. And whereas we built our consumption habit on iTunes and Apple Podcasts, and then maybe some of those independent apps that came after that.
Yeah.
This new generation is building their consumption habit on YouTube. And not only is that happening, at the same time, every age group is getting more into YouTube and is being fed quote unquote podcasts and becoming podcast consumers. So it's an interesting time. And I think for myself, I have nothing against YouTube. We're live streaming on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
I don't want it to have all of the power. And historically, what's kept the balance of power on the internet has been open standards, open protocols. You could have a centralized platform like, even Medium and Substack really leverage open standards, but centralized platforms like Facebook, fine, you can have that, but the holding the tension is, you could still have, instead of having a Facebook page, you could still build yourself a website for your business,
Yeah, that's really tricky. Actually, it'd be interesting. Do you know on the breakdown of like when it says podcast consumed on YouTube, are those shorts? Are those the full episodes, or is it kind of a blend of that kind of stuff? Or
Yeah. So that chart I showed you was from PodTrack.
okay.
And so they have some sort of rubric for tracking that. What I'm guessing is of the 250 shows, they have an RSS feed and traditional ways of consuming that RSS feed, but then they're also cross-posting on YouTube, and so they're just tracking their own stats from,
Gotcha.
Which makes it interesting. And it's interesting that Apple, now some people, again, this is what's so difficult about making these arguments, is that Apple Podcasts still does some auto downloading. It's been lessened quite a bit. I don't think it's as much of a thing, but
it's not the default for sure. You have to opt into it, right? Per show.
You have to opt into it. And also, if you don't listen to a show, there's some sort of threshold and you have auto downloading turned on,
certain
they'll
number of
stop.
episodes. Yeah.
I still think this observation holds true, which is there is a cohort of super consumers that are 35 to 55 and have this additional attribute of just being early to podcasting that have kind of brought us as an industry to where we are today. And there's all sorts of unanswered questions about what happens with the next generation.
Yeah.
Because that next generation will have different economic attributes, right? They're like Gen Z right now. It's an open question as to how much they're going to be earning, when they're going to be able to start careers, if there's going to be the same kind of career opportunity that our generation had. Will they have the same, all that stuff. But then also, is YouTube just going to own all media consumption, whether it's movies, TV shows, shorts, clips, podcasts, everything? Like,
I mean, what's wild is I know people who actually just use YouTube to listen to music. They'll pull up an album playlist and it may or may not have a video on it. They just have it playing in the background.
I mean, YouTube is how I consume the news. Like, I can watch CBC News. They live stream it every day. And so instead of going into the CBC app or finding it on my cable provider, it's just more convenient to watch it as a live stream. They've built a great product. And using all of that Google muscle, they've really been able to capture consumer attention, but even more important, consumer habits. That's the hard part, right? Is like, even Vimeo probably ran into this, which is when somebody says, my new music video just dropped, were people thinking, I'm going to go check that out on YouTube first? Or were they thinking, I'm going to go check that out on Vimeo? Now, Vimeo had a lot of music videos, but whatever it becomes a person's default path to a thing, it's so difficult to fight that.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is probably, again, what gets shared on social. Are people sharing the Vimeo embed or the YouTube embed, to your point of like, how do they hear about it? What's being linked from either the email or, we're just...
and also just what gets reinforced over and over and over again throughout a day.
Totally.
To the point where it doesn't even matter what's being shared on social. It doesn't even matter what's happening. It has been this behavior has been reinforced so many times that now it's just the de facto behavior. In the same way that
they're searching with Google, and that's the first result, which is pushing them to YouTube, which is kind of the circle.
And I mean, you think Microsoft, with all of their resources, and you could say maybe strategically they didn't push this the way they should have, but Bing is in some ways a better experience. they did some interesting, innovating things. Like, it's not like they totally, messed up there. Sure, maybe in some ways, but it's just so hard once something has grabbed the cultural zeitgeist and once it's being reinforced, it's just, you don't even realize how it's being reinforced. It's like, when a search engine appears on a movie, what is it, Google or is it Bing? And when people talk about, now we're even seeing podcasts being shown on TV shows and movies. Like, a character will have a podcast. Well, how is that being presented? Is it being presented as something on YouTube? Like, they're, as a part of the script, they're saying, how many YouTube views did it get? Well, that's reinforcing something in the culture. And you can see how dangerous this gets too. Like, Twitter totally benefited from this. And so even though I think, since Elon took over, I think Twitter, I think he's done a terrible job of doing all the things he promised to do and even making it better,
more divided. And
it's just like it's a worse product and a worse experience by almost every measure. But it still has captured so much of the culture that politicians still have to use it because. And what gets quoted on CNN? Is it a tweet or is it a blue sky skeet? It's like, so I don't know what to do about it. I feel like I still am willing to fight the battle, even though I know it's difficult.
Yeah. So I guess with the you said it was the pod standards approach. So your recommendation is that they include this kind of alternate streams inclusion into the RSS feed.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. I guess at the same time, what would be preventing you from just actually having like two streams available for a podcast, like a video stream and
that's the next
audio stream?
That's the next step. Because I think the cool thing about HLS is because it gets chunked out in little bits, basically. Another thing that we haven't been able to provide traditionally with an audio download is consumption stats. So how far do people get in the episode? If they, even from a dynamic ad insertion perspective, you could say, well, if someone is 75% of the way through an episode, why don't we serve them this ad instead of, and we could do that dynamically. So there's some.
Well, there are podcast apps that support streaming now, or is it all?
Right now, it's all unless they're rehosting the audio. Even if it looks like streaming, it is all when you push play in Spotify or whatever. It's all essentially still downloading that audio file to the device.
Gotcha. Because I think wasn't it Overcast, the Marco Arment one. I think he had a streaming thing in there for a little bit, and then he ended up maybe reverting it or something. I'm not sure. There's like some sort of
even if you're streaming, even if it looked
but
like
it's
streaming,
it's not like HLS where you get the chunks and you're really being able to kind of granularly feed him down
and this has been done before. I'm not sure how Stitcher implemented it, but Stitcher was one of these podcast apps that was rehosting audio, and they had streaming.
Trying to like optimize the delivery of it.
So that's I think this whole HLS discussion is interesting no matter what, because it gives us more options. So we can keep the old audio enclosure there and still make that the default, but a podcast app could search for an HLS audio stream or
video stream
and then depending on what they support and what the consumer is requesting, they could provide whatever they want. And so it gives us way more optionality, and there's a bunch of other cool stuff we can do that. It also opens up live streaming in a way that we haven't really been able to do in a big way. So you could there already is a a podcasting 2.0 tag for live streaming. And
Oh, cool.
I mean, personally, again, I like being able to stream live on YouTube and have people show up and leave comments and all that stuff. I would love for if you and I are going live for that to pop up in Pocket Casts and go, hey, you know, the panel is doing or Jam Sessions is doing a live stream, and people can listen to it live. And then,
well, I mean, that's actually one of the
interact.
recent additions to Blue Sky. Now, granted, it's restricted to certain publishers, but they do have a new live thing. So similar to like if
Oh,
you're
interesting.
live on Twitter, you can actually apply a live URL and status, and then your profile now appears as live. So I think that's really cool. And actually, I started working on a basically like a Twitter/X Spaces alternative for Blue Sky called skylounge.social. So
Yes.
because I think those are such a cool concept of like serendipitously being able to stumble into a live conversation, and similar to this live show where people can ask questions as people are talking or being, you know, pulled into the conversation, to
Yeah.
be able to have that kind of live thing, and then also to have a social network that supports basically the discovery of that. Because I think that's the hardest part, is like, how do people know when you're live? You need to have it plugged in to
Yeah.
a place where people are congregating,
Yes.
which is
Yeah. So
tricky.
is this something you're still working on? I see you got a landing page for it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna roll out like a beta soon, and test it out. But I do have another build that I haven't pushed yet that does have all the WebRTC and socket stuff, and basically being able to join a room and have all the audio stuff. So slowly but surely, I was trying to time box it into getting it out in May and just basically like do like a 1 month build, but I slipped on that a little bit, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the challenge with a lot of this stuff is, you know, like, I mean, this is true for us too. It's like, as a companies, as everyone that's a member of the Podcast Standards Project, almost 90% of them are very small companies. Like we're talking,
Yeah.
I think almost everybody's under 20 people. So we want to explore this stuff. We care about this stuff, but we still have to keep our businesses running.
Yeah.
And with a lot of this open exploration, like for you to work on this, like, is there a business here?
See, that's the thing. I was trying to time box it because I don't really think it is. I think it's more of a tech discovery thing. Maybe there could be a little bit. I think the fact that it is web based versus being locked into an app, because even like Twitter Spaces, you can only get to it via the mobile app.
Yeah.
And also like things like Clubhouse don't really exist. So if there was like a more easily accessible, like this could easily be turned into an app. But also the fact that it's in the web and you
Yeah.
can access it on any browser, whether it's a mobile browser or a
Yeah.
desktop browser. I think utilizing that and utilizing, to your point, like open web standards like WebRTC and some of this other stuff, or RTMP if it requires that kind of streaming, I think it's pretty powerful. But yeah, I don't know. I think, to your point, I don't know if there could be a business there. If anything, this was more of a exploratory thing, but I don't know if I have the network or the reach to make it something that would be self-sustaining. I think it would actually have to be people who are kind of in on the open standards, or in on, you know, like in on the app protocol, and
Yeah.
more involved in that in order to then back it. Maybe through, I saw like Graze.social, it has like some grant programs that they're offering some people. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a weird dynamic where more companies want to have more conversations with their people and have, you know, kind of open dialogues. But I feel like some of that's happening in Discord. Some of it's happening on webinars or in like Zooms and stuff. So I don't know. There's not really like a congregating place where this stuff seems to be happening, and where you can kind of have that serendipity of discovering these conversations,
Yeah.
which
I mean,
is unfortunate.
this is why I think I get excited about podcast standards because we do have a place where people are congregating. People are in their podcast apps already.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
we have this install base, and the hope is that by coordinating amongst a bunch of different providers, we actually do have some power and some influence to, like Pocket Casts is one of the members, and they have a fair number of people who use them. And so for them to implement HLS or live streaming or whatever, all of a sudden we have a place for that to happen. And we can all collaborate on, we're competitors, a lot of us, but by putting all of these brains together and then also having all these people with different relationships with, different platforms and people at those platforms, we can also do advocacy work with Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all these things, and even providers like Cloudflare to move this forward as a group. And then we also have, it goes, every hosting provider has, tens of thousands of creators on it. Every listening app has tens of thousands of listeners on it.
Yeah.
And so we have, if we can coordinate an approach to getting the message out, whatever that is, like it could be, the unifying message could be, hey, are you tired of ads on YouTube? Well, the alternative is go pick up Pocket Cast or Fountain or True Fans or one of these independent podcasting apps. You can consume your favorite shows, audio or video, without YouTube's ads. They're just going to be baked in ads or whatever the podcast is doing, but without these additional ads that YouTube is running that are driving you nuts. That's a clear differentiator. It could also just be things like, are you tired of YouTube shorts sucking you into mindless brain rot? Why don't you go somewhere else that's more mindful and more isn't trying to ensnare you and your attention?
Yeah. Well, it's even kind of cool is I could see baking into that RSS feed like a shorts, another alternate stream of a short. Like if you just want to catch like a quick 2 minute of the episode because you're debating on whether you want to add it to your queue to listen to the whole thing, you could kind of preview that kind of stuff. So I think, having that consortium of people basically all rallying around, pushing the standard and, evolving it, I think you can create that kind of experience that could rival and also just make podcasting a better, more enjoyable experience, and give you the options of listening to it or watching it or do whatever, but all through the same, feed. And
that's approach. The dream.
Yeah.
Because there is like, again, there's the podcasting 2.0 project is kind of out there. They're creating tons of new tags and features. And the idea is that the podcast standards project would come behind them and say, there's a lot of good ideas here, but let's actually standardize and around a few of these and really get it out there in a bigger way. And I think we've been able to achieve that with podcast transcripts. I think we've been able to achieve that to a lesser extent, with things like Podroll, which is a way of recommending podcasts. So you as a creator could recommend other podcasts that people might enjoy. These things are getting way more distribution than they would have if we just stayed in our silos. But it's still.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The network thing, that's only an Apple Podcast thing, right? Networks.
There are network level features that are in the open podcasting ecosystem.
There are.
Yep. And that's also the hope is that, see, transcripts was something that Apple wanted to do already, and they were planning on building their own thing, but it just became a no-brainer for them to incorporate the open standard. And so our hope is, like there's a person tag that allows you to say, here's the host. And I noticed that you're using it on your show. And that we would like Apple to incorporate that into Apple Podcasts. They have host and guest avatars, but they curate that manually right now.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was kind of curious like how those were showing up because it wasn't consistent with what was being specified in the, in the feed.
Yeah. So there's no reason that Apple shouldn't be picking up on all of these people tags that you've put into your podcast.
Yeah.
And that's just, at this point, that's just advocacy, trying to get them to implement it, and also trying to get Spotify to implement it. And even, I think because YouTube, we've been a little bit more tenuous with our relationship with YouTube, but even them, they're going to be a part of the picture whether we like it or not. So, can you incorporate some of these new features? Because the more distribution we get for open features, the more resilience I think the open standard has. In the same way that, once email became fully distributed, at that point, creating your own standard, your own centralized standard within that became so much harder. You just had to play game. You had to play ball with, what the open ecosystem was doing. I'm hoping, I think in retrospect, as much as people hate email and hate spam and all that, I kind of view email now as like this beautiful place. If you think about it, it's just like it works. It's truly open. If I don't want to use Gmail anymore, there's lots of good independent providers I could go and try.
And you can take your, custom domain and email address anywhere you go. And
if you send an email from Proton Mail to a Gmail address, Gmail will respect it and deliver the mail. And sure, is it messy? Yeah. If we could rewrite the standard in 2025, would it be better? Maybe. I don't know. It's pretty powerful the way it's been written, and they've been able to add some features over the years. Like there is an email standards project as well, and that they have to slowly introduce new standards, and it all works. It's just I don't know. I'm kind of like the open web, even from a creator's perspective. And when I think about my kids, it's like, what kind of world do I want them to live in? Do I want them to live in a world where they can only participate in an ecosystem controlled by Facebook or Google or Microsoft? Like that just seems so lame compared to something building websites and writing your own HTML and,
Yeah, well, who knows? Maybe in this AI world, there will be less reliance on one single aggregator, and people will kind of get more served up their own kind of custom feed or blend of stuff. And if you have these open RSS feeds that are feeding into that and now are becoming indexed and also have the media accessible to them, there's no reason why you couldn't have some sort of weird organic feed that you kind of pull up. And I mean, that's kind of a weird future, but
I'm wondering if there is going to be a counter movement to all of this, which is just, you know what? I'm tired of algorithms and LLMs serving me stuff. I just want to go back to a simpler time where I went, even like kids who grow up now are obsessed with the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're really curious about cassette tapes and going to Blockbuster. And
I've heard CDs are going to be the new thing.
CDs,
CDs are going to be the new vinyl,
Yeah. I mean, if you go to a punk rock show now, what they sell at their merch booth is cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And I think there could be a countercultural movement, which is like, I'm tired of these mega corporations serving up stuff algorithmically or using some sort of AI thing. It just in the same way that it kind of, there's an algorithm on LinkedIn, and invariably people just start performing for the algorithm,
Gaming it. Yeah.
and then it's just like every fucking LinkedIn post is some performative drivel, and
Well, that's even my take on like YouTube. If you zoom out and you look at the YouTube homepage or whatever,
yeah,
every single thumbnail is the exact same kind of
totally
face and big image with, it's like there's no, everyone's playing the game. And unfortunately, everyone's playing the game. I've been thinking about, it's like, is there a way to buck that? That's why I kind of just go with like the black thumbnail with the text, like almost like understated to stand out in like this sea of sameness. But
yeah.
at the same time, I don't think it's really moving the needle for me personally, but more of a silent protest against the conformity to these kind of requirements that are just being enforced on people in order to kind of like play the game. I don't know.
This is why I wonder if, because there is something beautiful about in my podcast feed, I just get served stuff, like even I'm still subscribed to This American Life and Hidden Brain and a lot of these NPR shows. And every once in a while I'll be on a long road trip and it'll just autoplay the next thing I had in my new episode queue.
Because it wasn't queued up, or something, yeah.
And those have been some of the best. It's just like, I wouldn't normally choose this first, but I think maybe what we're seeing as a culture is like what we would normally choose first is like not always good for us. It's like eventually it just ends up devolving
to
candy. The candy, yeah. And again, I don't know how prevalent that will become, but at the very least, we need that to be an option for people.
Yeah.
I think you need some sort of refuge from. It's pretty. I think more and more people are eventually getting kind of disgusted with everything that's being served to them. It just becomes like, it feels yucky. It just feels like, ugh, like get me out of this. I want to get outside. 2, I want to be hanging out with real people. Like, I don't want to just be yelling at people on Twitter anymore. I just want to go to a coffee shop and sit down and have a coffee with somebody and have a good conversation. Totally. But then 3, if I am going to be on the internet and participating in the internet, I want to be, I want to have less of this like candy thrown at me all the time. And I want to be able to mindfully consume something of substance. And then I also want to be able to mindfully participate as a creator or have some sort of dialogue with it.
Yeah, and the community that's available there, right? Like, again, basically continue or extend that conversation or just that contribution to the thought pool that's like growing. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see how it ends up. I mean, for me, I think when we talk about like founder focus fit, like what am I focusing on right now? Mm-hmm. In the beginning, your focus has to almost exclusively be finding an economic engine that will drive the business and will fund your life. But once you've achieved that, now what fires me up is stuff like this. I want to invest my time in stuff like this. And so even if it doesn't work, it feels like it's a battle worth fighting.
Yeah,
it feels like
it's a good initiative to be backing and promoting, right? And
exactly.
Putting your energy towards,
Yeah.
I mean, other than video, do you feel like there's other things that you all are exploring at Transistor to just kind of level up the app or just like
I mean, all the time. So even something as simple as like the pod roll, like being able for a creator to be able to recommend a podcast is already in Transistor, but there's no way to show those recommendations right now. So we're building it into the podcast websites. So you'll be able to feature other shows that you like or you would recommend, and then maybe even building on top of that, like if you recommend a show, maybe we could notify them and maybe they could return the favor, so we could have a little bit more of that kind of cross promotion.
Yeah, it'd be cool to kind of do the same thing that Kit and I guess Substack do with like recommending newsletters and stuff to follow, and have that kind of social camaraderie to kind of like help each other level up and then get more exposure.
We've been investing a lot in our dynamic audio insertion tech, which you can see if we talk about something like creator recommendations, you could extend that even more, which is a recommendation could also include a little audio snippet, which is, hey, this is Justin. If you're looking for other shows that are kind of in the same vein, you might want to check out Jam Sessions. And that could be then, that dynamic audio could be inserted in the show, right? So,
Totally.
So we've been investing a lot in dynamic audio insertion tech, and I think that has a benefit both in terms of playing the game, which in podcasting, a lot of the economy is driven by advertising, and dynamically inserted ads is just another one of those. We've been kind of like cautious about that whole thing because there's a lot of ad tech that's just kind of gross. But I think now I'm feeling more and more like we need open alternatives to the centralized ad tech platforms. So if we live in a future where only YouTube controls it, or Google controls it, or Facebook controls the majority of it, I would much prefer having some sort of open alternative, which could be, you can buy ads on an independent podcast and those ads can be dynamically inserted in the show.
Yeah. I guess I kind of, I'm sure you listened to this week's Mostly Technical where Ian announced outro.fm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he has some ideas on that front.
Yeah. And the challenge with podcasting has always been, it is in terms of its market value, it is just very small. It's not very, and so I wrote a post quite a while ago called making a main dish versus a side dish.
Yeah.
And essentially it's just, are you familiar with the concept of value chains? So like in a value chain, we could take podcasting as an example. Which parts of the value chain get most of the value? And in podcasting on the creator side, hosting has traditionally been what gets most of the value in the value chain. So if a podcaster is going to spend, $200 in a year, a big chunk of that's going to go to hosting. And then, recording tools like Riverside and Squadcast and Zencaster came out, and people were also willing to commit some money to that. Those are both main dishes. Those are main pieces of the value chain. I think the challenge with a lot of these other things is they really become smaller pieces on top of the big pieces.
Yeah.
And if the overall market is small in terms of the amount of money in that market, it just means you might not always be able to get enough money. And I think this is a common mistake that people make is I'm a big fan of the Statamic CMS. I use it for all my sites, but my comment to Jack, who's the founder, is you've got incredible software, but you're capturing very little of the value chain. In the CMS world, most of the money in the value chain goes to hosting. And so because you're just offering the software that goes on the hosting, you're basically making DigitalOcean, you're sending a lot of money to DigitalOcean and all these other platforms.
Laravel Cloud and
wherever
else they decide to.
So I think that's going to be the challenge with something like Outro is just and we've made this mistake all the time is it's like, man, I'm a creator and I would like this, but the number of shows in podcasting is like, there maybe is 4 million shows total, and maybe 700,000 of those regularly published episodes. That's just a tiny total market, right? It's not you, almost every product or company, you need a fairly large funnel at the top of people in motion, and then it's just narrowing as you go along in terms of like who's actually going to sign up for your thing and pay you money.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was just checking the chat to see if
We got Junta.
Junta.
Yeah, I know he's all in for the nostalgia. The problem is that my 19-year-old son reminds me often that he's like, yes, there might be a counterculture movement, and yes, kids like the 90s, but he said the majority of his peers, he's
still watching YouTube.
They're watching YouTube. They're totally into the mind rot. So
they didn't grow up with the 4 channels or whatever that you had back in the 90s.
Yeah.
I remember trying to get Kids in the Hall.
Oh, yeah.
Across Lake Erie, and I'd have to tune in the antenna just right to be able to watch that. And kids don't have to deal with that today. They can just pull up any episode they want at any snippet, and
but there is a observation there about human behavior that might be interesting to apply, which is like when we were growing up, so much at the time it was frustrating, but so much of the fun was going out and trying to get this stuff. So it's like if you wanted to hear cool indie music, I lived out in the country. I had to like tune my radio antenna to the college radio station that was a little bit too far, and I would just get pieces of it.
I was gonna say, me and my friends, we used to listen to this college radio station. It was only like 30 or 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
But they were obviously on like a really low power antenna.
Yeah.
And so we'd string it up, and then we'd have some aluminum foil that would kind of extend like this wired antenna. And then we'd call in and request like whatever metal songs that we wanted to listen to on Metal Storm.
Yeah.
But
and that was part of the fun.
That was actually like the thing you were doing. It wasn't like just this thing that was playing in the background. You were focused on it, and everyone was in on it together, like trying to make the best experience you could, like with what you had.
And I think there is this threshold or tension that we haven't figured out, because I remember like once cable internet came out, I was like, finally, like I can just like, dial up was such a pain. And then once, it became easier to find stuff. Like the other thing that my friends and I got really into to breakdancing, and there was all these like contest videos you could buy on VHS, but you had to go downtown to the cool streetwear place, and you'd buy them. And these VHS tapes were like $45 in '95. Like that's like, I don't know, $100 now or something. And at the time, I think we felt like if you had told me like, would you prefer to just like go on YouTube and find this stuff? I would have said, yeah. Like it's so hard to find this stuff. But I think there is this threshold where making it a little bit harder than it needs to be. And maybe there's part of that needs to be reintroduced to the culture that people are hungry for, in the same way that you could say, we're going to release this, but we're going to make it a little bit harder. Like you're going to have to go on a little bit of a scavenger hunt to get this, or you're going to have to walk through a few steps, or you're going to have to, I don't know, you're going to have to be in the club.
There's a musician, Cindy Lee. She had I guess they had an album that was released recently. They only released it on YouTube for a bit.
Yeah.
Only. Like, you couldn't find it on any of the platforms. Eventually, I think maybe Bandcamp like offered vinyl sales, and then if you had the vinyl sales, you could listen to the downloads.
Yeah.
But kind of, now granted, we've already had the conversation, like YouTube isn't necessarily like the exclusivity place that you're going to find something super niche and hardcore, but I did think it did go in a little bit in the counter to what a traditional music release would look like, and actually putting it on a video platform, not having video, it's just the album art through all, through all the songs. It's not like they embellished or added any sort of like additional multimedia experience to it.
Yeah. We're
But
going to artificially limit access.
yeah, and they kind of like artificially throttled the access to it, which was kind of, I think it helped with the allure of the album. I mean, it's a great album, but maybe a little bit more of that. But I think to your point, maybe a little bit more. You gotta find a person with the key. I mean, like to your point about finding the breakdance videos, it's like my friend who got a skate video from his cousin and the lore that was around, just like the acquiring of this coveted, like girl skate vid, or something like that. That plays into your memories and you connect with it so much more, to the point to where when you have a sea of content that you can easily pick from, it no longer becomes as intriguing. If anything, I think the reason why I even go to YouTube is because I don't want to sit there and scroll through like Netflix to find something. Because I don't know. It's like, for whatever reason, it's just enough friction or just not enough content there. And their YouTube's algorithm's so good. It's like I can watch a quick little 5-minute skate vid or some sort of weird music tech gear review thing, or watch a guy build some cabinets, or whatever you're into or whatever you have available at the time.
I mean, Dave Junta in the comments here is saying the friction increases the value of success.
Totally.
And so this idea of artificially introducing friction, I think is interesting. And I think our benefit is that we lived in that era where you had to work for it, where you had to send away, like you had to mail away for like stickers.
Oh, the PO box.
Yeah.
A dollar self-addressed stamped envelope to a PO box, and
that's right.
Get those stickers back. Yeah.
And so we don't have to give up everything. But I think we are starting to see as a culture, maybe you and I would have been like, please just give it to us all. Like I was one of the first people who bought an Apple TV set-top box because I was like, I don't want commercials. I want to be able to download the TV shows I want to watch. I'm happy to pay $1.50 or $3 or whatever it is for an episode if I don't have to watch commercials.
Yeah. But and watch it on your own terms, essentially.
Watch it on your own terms. But now I think we've seen, with no friction, with the absence of friction, we kind of become dead as a culture. We become dead psychologically. We numb ourselves to the point where it's like, I've got a subscription to HBO and to Netflix and to Amazon and to Disney Plus and everything. And like you, I'm just going to go to YouTube because it helps me restrict my options instead of, whatever it is, like how many titles is it?
Or like even the cognitive load of like which app, like which show is on which app. And
but you could see a world where, what do you call that? Where what does a DJ do when they're choosing tracks? It's not cultivating. They are
curating.
Curating. I think I wonder if we will see people going back to curating and having a curator that they trust. So, back in the day, we would all trust Kottke to give us the best links. And so we would go to kottke.org or whatever, and we would just trust that he was going to
subscribe to his RSS feed.
or subscribe to his RSS feed. But we would just trust, like, he's going to mindfully go out and find stuff for us. And now we've just given that job to algorithms.
Yeah.
But I wonder if we're going to see if the counterculture will be, now let me curate things for you. And I think this is actually one place where podcasting could have done so much better. There's this amazing app that's been around forever called Huffduffer. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not familiar, no.
So it's been around for decades now. Huffduffer.com. And basically, it allows you to go to any page with an embedded audio file and add it to a custom RSS feed.
Oh, cool.
And so you can see people are adding stuff here or whatever, but you can create your own custom curated, like you could have Ryan's best episodes of the week, where every time there's a good episode, you have a custom curated feed that still gives them the download.
Yeah.
That still gives them
still
everything.
linking to their audio file. It's just a different RSS feed. You're just
Different, yeah. And I think playlists and curation and manual curation is an interesting piece of this that might come back, where, and the other thing that gives me hope to all this kind of, all this, and maybe we could wind down on this. Sorry, I talked a lot.
No, it's all good. And actually, I think I have to leave and pick up my daughter here pretty soon. So yeah, we might need to wind it down. But
maybe here's where
it's been good.
we can leave it. Is last night my wife and I turned on our Switch, and you can get every SNES game and every NES game. And almost 90% of the time, we end up playing Super Mario Bros. 3. And I was thinking, like, we're living in this AI world where we got all this tech and everything's what. This is the question I want to leave.
This one game.
This is the question I want to leave people with, and I'm curious to hear the responses. And they can just reply on Blue Sky or whatever, or on YouTube. Has there been a game as good since then? Like, that game came out a long time ago. In terms of gameplay, in terms of fun, in terms of just dropping you right in and having, and I asked ChatGPT and Claude and all them, like, what's a game like this that's come out since? Like, even in 2000 or 2005 or 2010 or 2015 or 2020 or 2025. So we live in this world where AI is, algorithms and everything is. I still don't feel like we've made a game as good since then. If that's true, and maybe Nintendo did it with the, the Super Nintendo version was pretty good and the Wii U version was pretty good. How come nobody else has made a game, in my mind, as good? That's interesting to me. And
I think it still comes down to craft, and just like tapping into something. And I've heard you talk about it. I totally agree. I think the one thing is you need to have your finger on the pulse. You need to understand what resonates, what friction to add, what friction to remove, and the tension between that kind of stuff, and how to really kind of like hone it to be this unique thing that stands alone. And I don't think there's going to be automation that just achieves that.
Yeah. So maybe that's the hope, people, is that there's still craft. And that's if someone made a game that was just as fun as Super Mario Bros. 3, I would buy it.
4:30. Okay, I got it. All right, I gotta go.
Okay. See ya. Thanks, man.
Yeah, it was good chatting, dude. We'll have to do another one of these soon.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah. Jamsessions.fm, thepanelpodcast.com, right?
That's right.
All right. Have a great one, man. Later.